Welcome to HH Law. I'm John Henderson, and today we're talking about whether or not you have a good personal injury case or not. So what's a good personal injury case? When we're evaluating whether or not you have a good personal injury case or not, we're going to be looking at negligence. Let's talk about insurance. Let's talk about what a good case is versus a bad case. And I'm going to give you a recap at the end of this video and hopefully give you some suggestions and pointers as well. First things first, let's establish some groundwork here and let's talk about negligence. You got to prove negligence in most instances. There can be cases that are strict liability cases like a dog bite or something else. But when we're talking about automobile accidents or a slip and fall or other instances out there in the world, there are statutes on point that are very important to pay attention to. But a lot of times we're looking at the general world of negligence in order to determine if there's liability, if somebody was at fault. So negligence, we have to prove that somebody had a duty to act. So is there a statutory language in a code, or if there's an ordinance or something else, federal law, in fact, that somebody has to abide by, a restaurant owner or driving your vehicle? Is there a statute? Is there a law on the books? That's the duty to act. The second thing is, did they breach that duty? Did they violate codes or laws or statutes, an ordinance in some way? Did they violate it? The third thing is, did they have cause injury? Was there an injury associated at all? And the fourth thing is causation. Did the injury complained of result from a breach of that duty? So we have the duty, the breach, causation, and damages in order to establish the groundwork for a negligence case. The second thing to understand is liability. And so if you are involved in a situation, a slip and fall at a store or an automobile accident, does the other person have liability? That is trying to figure out, in the context of a car accident, did a police report label the other person at fault? Was there video camera that proved that that other person was at fault? The same thing is true in a store. A lot of times when we have somebody who slipped in a store or fell or tripped over something, that there's camera footage that we can see and that we will gain in the course of litigation that will either prove that our person slipped on their own accord or because of something that was hidden or unknown, slippery on the floor, for example, that caused them to fall, and therefore we can show that there's been some sort of breach of those duties. So trying to determine who is at fault, who has liability is the big thing there. Now, moving on from the liability question, we also talk about insurance. And so once it's established that we have the general framework of negligence has been proven and liability, we understand who is at fault, they've been labeled as breaching the duty, and they now have liability, we move on to whether or not there's insurance that might kick in and pay or how damages would be paid for. Insurance can be really complex, but really we're looking at, like, at my house, I have insurance in the event that something happens to somebody on my property. My car, I have insurance if I accidentally run into somebody, negligently run into somebody and cause them injury. My automobile insurance will kick in. I, as a business owner here at our law office, have the same thing. We have insurance that would cover if somebody comes onto the premises and is injured. This building that we're in also has a separate form of insurance. So there's lots of insurance layers out there. People also have umbrella policies and a variety of different things as well. So one of the big things to look for when you are evaluating if you have a good personal injury case or not is whether or not there's insurance available that you can tap into to pay for it. The term, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip or out of a rock, or those sorts of phrases also applies in the personal injury world. It is entirely possible that you're seriously injured by somebody who there's no insurance and they're totally broke and they don't have any money. The question you have to ask yourself in those instances is it worth going through a year or two of litigation to get a piece of paper that says that they owe you money and you don't actually get anything out of it. And that's a question that you would have to address with a lawyer, but you need to know that going into the consultation with a lawyer, that that's entirely possible that could be an outcome. And moving on from this liability section, we need to understand damages. So if you're involved in anything like a dog bite or car accident or slip and fall or anything like that where you are injured, what are the damages that you are really trying to recover for? That can be lost wages, obviously your medical bills related to the incident, ongoing care. Maybe in some instances, if you have scarring, you might have to have repairs done to that, plastic surgery in the future. There are other things like loss of consortium as well that could play into those damages. Again, you're going to want to talk to a lawyer and try to come up with what are these things? My business suffered. I have these medical bills. A lot of times it will be if there's a serious accident, somebody might actually be in a wheelchair or they might have a traumatic brain injury or something that is impacting their day-to-day living and they need outside care to come in and now they're living the rest of their life in a wheelchair, or that they have cognition issues that they have to deal with and they might have to go into a memory care facility. Something like that are very serious damages that you're going to try to recover for in the future. So there's an assortment of different issues going on involved with damages. Typically, we look right out of the gate, though, for medical bills, lost wages, are two of the big ones, and then future medical expenses as well. So what's a good personal injury case versus a bad personal injury case? Well, every time you are injured doesn't mean that you should recover money. Every time that you are wronged doesn't mean that you should recover money. There are going to be lots of instances that go on today in the state of South Carolina, across the country, across the world, where somebody is treated not well and that they are offended by that treatment. That doesn't mean that they should recover money. Or there will be lots of instances where somebody is injured and it doesn't mean that they're going to recover money. In order for you to have a case in which you might deserve compensation from somebody else, you have to prove either strict liability, there was a violation of a statute, or negligence, one of these things. So you have to prove that there's liability that attaches to that case. Somebody else was at fault for your injuries. And then you have to have damages associated with that as well. So a good case to bring might be something like an automobile accident where clearly somebody else was at fault. Maybe there's a witness that says that. Also, the police report indicates that as well, and that you have serious injuries and maybe are ongoing. And behind that, we have insurance from that other vehicle that might pay for those injuries and for those bills. In that context, you've got a really good shot at trying to negotiate using a lawyer to help negotiate a good settlement agreement. Now, you got to understand that you're never going to be made whole in any of these cases, because there isn't any amount of money that somebody could pay me to be rear-ended by an 18-wheeler. I just don't want that to have happened to me. It's most likely going to result in lifelong injuries, lifelong permanent negative impact on my life, inability to sleep, early onset degenerative disc disease, arthritis, a variety of different things, not being able to hold my grandkids one day. So there isn't any amount of money that I would take for that. So the only thing you have is trying to recover money in those instances. And so for that reason, it's important, I think, to use a lawyer to help negotiate settlement terms. But in the instance that you do not have a source of recovery, like maybe that person is broke and doesn't have any money or no insurance who caused your injuries, is it worth it to get a piece of paper, to go through all this litigation to try to get a piece of paper that says that they owe you a bunch of money? That's a question that you and a lawyer are going to have to determine. But if you don't have clear liability and you don't have a source of being compensated, or you don't have actually any injuries or real damage to complain of in the first place, then you really have to think twice about whether or not you want to get involved in this sort of litigation or not. You really just need to focus on instances where there's clear liability. You can get compensated for that, and there are actual damages associated with the case. If any of those elements that we were talking about are a little bit shaky, you're going to have to get an industrious lawyer to take a look at it and see whether or not he or she would be willing to get in the fight with you. If you're really wronged in some way, the best thing you can do is contact a lawyer. Now, we are lawyers in the state of South Carolina, so we can't provide you advice for what's going on necessarily in some other states. And when it comes to personal injury, there are a variety of different rules and regulations in different states. For example, in South Carolina, we have different comparative negligence rules than they have in the state of North Carolina. And comparative negligence means whether or not you can recover if you were a little bit at fault and the other side was a lot at fault, or 50-50 at fault for your own injuries. Those rules are different in every single state. In South Carolina, for example, if you are more than 50% at fault, you cannot recover against another party. In North Carolina, if you're more than 1% at fault, if you're negligent in any regard, and that causes your injuries in a lot of respects, then you can't recover at all. So those rules are different. For those reasons, I encourage you to contact a local lawyer, or at least a lawyer in your state, for more specific information. But I hope that this video has provided you a context. What's a good case? What's a bad case? I'm John Henderson. Thanks for watching HH Law.